Global reputation and global brand management is an extremely complex task. If you're a global player, you're active in various markets, in various cultures, even you have to speak various languages. So you need to keep track of your global communication and your specific communication strategies. You need to track them, and you need to make sure that you understand if you're actually having success with the goals that you're setting and if your reputation actually is improving as you're moving on. So how do you do that? In order to have a look at that, we have two brilliant experts here with us right now. First of all, I'm welcoming someone who has been advising about some of the world's largest companies in the areas of marketing, communications, business strategy, and stakeholder relations. He's here with us all the way from Copenhagen. He's the CEO of Caliber, a brand and reputation analytics firm. Welcome, Shahar Silbershatz.
Thank you.
Welcome. And the company that is actually presenting its case right here is Henkel. I guess known to almost everyone. Sorry, I'm having a feedback, trying to speak a bit more slowly. Okay, can you still hear me? Well, the people in the room can. I'm not sure about the speakers. This is, of course, all the drama we need to introduce our next speaker. So she's been very faithful. That's my seat. No, that's all right. I'll stay for the moment. Sorry, again. Spot on. So she's been a very faithful employee of Henkel's, staying with the company since 2013. She's responsible for the of Henkel's, staying with the company since 2013. She's responsible for the global strategy of the corporate brand and communication. She's the head of corporate branding and communication strategy. Welcome, Rabea Laakmann on stage.
Good morning, everyone.
And now we're really curious what you have to say.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. It's great to be here, and thanks for coming to listen to what we have to say here. I'm happy to be here and share the stage, of course, with Rabea. We are here today to talk about connecting the dots. And connecting the dots is, I would say, not a new thing. It's a challenge that's been around for many, many years. Who is familiar with this visual in the room? Not many. So this is the AMEC integrated evaluation framework. This evaluation framework a lot of companies use it around the world for measuring the effectiveness of their communication activities. There is an equivalent in Germany called the ICV model, and this is used by many companies around the world to connect the dots between what they do, how they plan activities within communications, and what is the value of those activities. And even though it's used quite extensively around the world, there's still a lot of companies that struggle with this part, the measurement part. So the measurement part, the left part there, often focuses very much on the output, on the media, and not so much on the impact. So you can see here from output to outcome to impact is typically how we want to measure the effectiveness of activities. So as communicators, probably many of you are familiar of output data that we look at. So output data can be media monitoring, it can be social tracking or social listening, it can be website traffic engagement and so on. And as communicators, we're all used to looking at this type of data in this type of dashboards on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. So there's a lot of output, very frequent output data that we look at. But when it comes to impact and output, there's this. So the companies that do in fact measure output and impact, and not many actually do, those typically do it through an annual reputation study. So very often we refer to impact as reputation, and by reputation we don't mean so much scraping the web and doing a media reputation, but actually asking people what they think about the company, how their perceptions are changing. That's the impact on their perceptions, on their behaviors, and that's actually what's going to change the commercial outcomes of the company. So when it comes to this perception data, typically companies do it on an annual basis. So they look at a lot of output data on a daily basis, that look at impact data, if at all, on an annual basis. And the problem with that is that it really fails to achieve what everybody is after, which is actionability. So inside actionability is something that we hear around the world that everybody wants to achieve. People are drowning in data. People are asking, how do we use this data? How do we actually make decisions based on this data? And there's a lot of things that go into making data actionable. So of course, to make it actionable, you want to be able to optimize your activities based on the data. You want to be able to connect what you're doing with what the impact is so that you can optimize it, so that you can mitigate it if there's something negative, a crisis, and that you can do it on time so that you can correlate the data with other data that you have, share it, and act very quickly. But all of these things are not achievable by the old way of looking at reputation, which is an annual measurement. Because with an annual measurement, you cannot connect what you've done or what's happened out in the world with the change in perception, because a lot of things happen throughout the course of the year. So you do not get actionability through annual or even quarterly reputation metrics. And over the years, what we've learned is that in order to achieve actionability, it's not about asking more questions in the survey. It's not about running more analytics on the data that you get from the survey. It's not about using more consultants to help you interpret it. It's really about continuity. So it's the continuity of accurate, relevant, representative data that we found is leading to actionability. Because that continuity, if the data is relevant and representative, so not maybe listening to people who are vocal online, but actually asking the relevant stakeholders and doing it on a daily basis, not on a quarterly or annual basis, that allows you really to connect what's happening with how it's impacting perceptions. And with this in mind, we created this platform, what we call the real-time tracker, which looks at, conducts thousands of surveys every day around the world and focuses on relevant stakeholders for companies. And that, for us, plugs this actionability gap between the very infrequent, hence non-actionable periodic research, and the very frequent but inaccurate social media listening, because it doesn't cover the right audiences. And that brings with it a lot of different benefits, but primarily it allows communication departments to make the connection between what they do and what is the impact on the company's commercial outcomes, commercial success, which is very important for comms teams. Now, we always say that, of course, this is important because an average corporate communications team probably conducts dozens, if not hundreds, of activities throughout the year. Each one of them might have a lot of media coverage, and each one of them would impact the reputation of the company. So, of course, it's important to keep your finger on the pulse and understand how each activity is impacting in the desired or not in the desired way the reputation of the company. But it's also even more so important today because of these things, these macro events that happen out there, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's industry crises, inflation, especially something like the war in the Ukraine. These type of geopolitical macro events, economic events, political events, in the past didn't used to impact so much perceptions of companies, but today they do, because they create expectations. Companies are expected to react. Companies get caught up in perceptions that move towards the industry, and companies need to know what's happening, when it happens, and how to react to that. So today, these things we see are impacting reputations in very sudden, very dramatic ways, and if you don't have your finger on the pulse, you don't know how to react. Even when it comes to legislative matters, like here we have one of our clients based in Atlanta, Georgia, in the US. There was a voting legislation in Georgia a few years ago that was very hotly debated, created a consumer boycott of companies headquartered in Georgia. Companies had to react very quickly. They used the data that we provided in order to tailor their political stance, in a sense, their corporate activism in response to something very sudden. So these things we see matter, and they require very, very agile response. So when it comes to something like the AMEC model, which is one of many, but when it comes to connecting the dots between what you plan, what you do, and how do you measure the outcome and the impact of these things, this is not something that you can do on an annual basis, on a quarterly basis. It's very good to start with an annual basis, but really it's an always-on process that repeats itself all the time. especially in this perma-crisis world that we live in. So I'm happy to hand it over to Rabea to talk about how they do it at Henkel.
So good morning, everyone. Happy to see that you opted for this session out of the bountiful options of the program. Today I'd like to share some insights and learnings we had when we started our reputation measurement project 2 years ago with Caliber and Shahar's team. I'd first like to shed some light on why we started this journey, so our starting point and influencing factors. I'd like then to talk about our data-driven approach, and then close with what do we actually measure when we talk about reputation for you as a glimpse into our system, and close with the elephant in the room, how do we make data actionable. So this doesn't come as a surprise to you. This is what we do as communicators. It's at the heart. So we strive to strengthen and protect our brand and our reputation. The challenge here is, however, and Shahar mentioned it already, that many companies lack the data foundation, so they don't actually have continuous and systematic data tracking of their brand and reputation. And all of us know the challenge, and also Shahar referred to it. We don't have the problem in general that we don't have enough data, but we're more drowning in data. So we need to connect the dots, and we need to have like a very strategic process for that. So 3 of the factors why we decided to embark on this journey of reputation measurement. Henkel was in a very interesting situation 2 years ago, almost like at a crossroads. So Shahar mentioned some of the external factors, why our environment gets more and more volatile, the pandemic, the energy crisis, obviously Russia invading Ukraine, you name it, so plenty of external factors. In our specific case, this tableau was topped off by one of the biggest transformations of our company, the merger of our 2 consumer businesses into one unit. So again, a bit of a quagmire of external and internal factors where you need data to take informed decisions. I will share an example in a minute. Second point, some of you might have noticed that we developed a new purpose for Henkel together with many employees around the world. We revamped our brand, and we had another reason, obviously, to have some more reliable data on brand perception. Third point, Shahar showed the AMEC framework for us, reputation data. So the central, or answers to the central question, what impact are we actually achieving with our communications? What do stakeholders think about us as a company? We didn't have these answers, and it was a bit of a missing piece for us in our data-driven journey. So I was talking about a very systematic strategic process. Don't get overwhelmed by all the data, the details you see on that slide. For us, it's a journey that obviously, as always, starts with strategy. So what you need at the beginning, and it might seem banal, but it's really, really important that you have an overview of your strategic topics derived from the company strategy. This means you will have a plan to also mitigate the agility that is asked by us as communicators. It will guarantee that all of us are working towards the same goal, and you have the backbone of your measurement because you can tag along these strategic topics. Then you come to the steering part, and for us, communications is planned, created in individual teams, so for example, external, internal comms, but we also have a format called News Conference, where we have representatives of the different communication disciplines sitting together every day to orchestrate communications. And that's where it becomes tricky, data culture. So to embed data into this format, into the daily work, I'm sure it's also a headache for you. And it takes time. It really takes time. It takes trainings, integrating regular data reviews enabled by tools. So we, for example, work with Sprinkler in making data valuable and as easy to access as possible. Which brings me to the last part, measurement. You need to have a common understanding what you are measuring. So for us, for example, when we look at outcome KPIs, we focus on reach and engagement. So if you have different teams measuring different stuff, it can get into a situation where it's only vanity metrics and not really anymore going towards one goal. And then one insight from our journey, we created actually one dashboard, one single one. Not all of the data is included yet. It's a journey. But for all communicators to access, you have the full-time, real-time view all the time in all the markets for all of the topics, and it will help you prove excellence in your communication department. Before we open up for questions and comments, I'd like to give you a better idea of what we are actually measuring. So it's daily online surveys of stakeholders in key markets. So this as a tip, you don't have to do the entire project in how many markets at the beginning. You can be selective. So look, what are your top 3 markets for your company? We benchmark against competitors. Awareness and familiarity are very important KPIs for our brand. We ask for stakeholder perceptions. So how sustainable do you find Henkel? How innovative do you find Henkel? How authentic? So very interesting insights for us. And then, very important, stakeholder intention. Would you invest in that company? Would you work for that company? So that's where it also becomes interesting for other departments to look at that data. And then me personally, I've shared it many times with Shahar, custom scores. That's one of the reasons why we picked Caliber. So you are able to plug your own comm strategy topics into the Caliber dashboard. So you have the wonderful data that you can benchmark against competitors, and you have your own set of strategic topics you can include in the survey where you can really say, okay, we are successful, we are on the right track, or we need to steer it differently. Last slide before we close, some learnings, some insights from our journey. So first of all, and also this might not seem like an eye-opener, but communication only goes so far in terms of moving the needle for reputation. So there's a certain slice of the cake that you can influence, but there are many, many other stakeholder experiences that influence reputation. So you need to reach out to other teams, sustainability management, employer branding, the marketing teams. So for us, just as share some data, 40% of the people we ask for their opinion on Henkel, they know Henkel through the product brands and not necessarily through the corporate brand. So it's super important to have a very strategic management of this interconnection between the corporate brand and the product brand, should this be the case for you. Second, taking informed decisions. One example from our company, you might have noticed 2 years ago when the war in Ukraine started, our company was under quite some pressure due to the significant exposure we had in the Russian business. It took us a couple of weeks to evaluate the different factors. And honestly speaking, the data we had from reputation measurement that showed the impact, together obviously with the heat we were getting on social media, were an influencing factor for the decision the top management took then to exit our Russian business. Last point, I'd like to argue against the notion that reputation data is at the end of the road and only measuring success, and then basically the journey stops. So use this data, if you have it, to fuel the process that Shahar showed again from the beginning. One example from our company, We are working now on another brand activation. And for example, we know from our data that we have a bit weaker reputation score within the Gen Z and younger target audiences. So this is something we can incorporate right away and say, okay, let's focus on these younger target audiences, and also include a link between the Henkel brand and the product brands, which we didn't necessarily do all the time, but we know it from the data. So use this to fuel the process from the beginning. So this, in all brevity, really looking forward, Shahar and myself, to your questions, your comments. Would be interested in where you are on that journey. Do you have annual surveys? Are you already doing regular reviews? Really keen to see how that topic resonates with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was super interesting, Rabea and Shahar, both of you. So overnewsed and underinformed is not only that we have in our daily media consumption ourselves, but of course it's something that we struggle with as communication professionals because there's so much data out there. But what do they mean, and how do I aggregate them so that they actually help me taking informed decisions? And thank you also for sharing those super interesting examples already. Now I'm sure we have questions in the room or maybe online. If you have a question, then please indicate it to me, then we'll travel with a mic to you. Sorry, have a little bit of patience for that because we have our guests online and we want to make sure they hear what you have to say. If you don't feel comfortable speaking English, no problem, I'll translate.
I should be fine. Thank you. Two questions, if you don't mind. Do you also use the same approach on the product level? Because we have a similar thing. We are the corporate brand, but then we have product brands. So is that all incorporated as well? And second question will be, were you able to replace any other tools? Or is it just basically pulling the data from the other tools that you're also paying and maintaining?
Yeah, very interesting questions. So first one, in all honesty, it's not incorporated yet. So that's a bit the end game we are dreaming about, that there would be a bit more cohesion between those two. So there are some other tools in place, and it's very decentralized. Even for one business unit, there would be different approaches for the individual brands. So you can see there's potential to be leveraged. And then the second one, this one actually for reputation data, we added a new tool. But for comms measurement, as I said, we have one dashboard in Power BI that takes data from different sources. So there's a data lake behind it. And we find that very powerful because it makes it easy to use. And it doesn't matter whether you're the comms manager in Chile or in France or doing sustainability communications, all of them will get their real-time data within one dashboard. Makes it easier to train, makes it easier to spark a certain willingness to not log into whatever 8 different tools, but have one platform where you have everything. So I can only highly recommend that.
Maybe I'll just add quickly on that, on the product side, that what we did decide to do is to incorporate the product brands into the survey so that we at least measure the relationship between the product brand and the corporate brand. So that's an element that's helping.
And it can help you as a proxy. So, for example, we are measuring a reputation also in the US, and there we have a bit of an awareness issue for the corporate brand. But some stakeholders then are more familiar with our product brand, so it helps you to get more people into the survey where they actually are informed about that company.
And then we have the next question up there, and if I think here in the front. Okay, you up next.
Thank you very much for sharing, first of all. I have kind of technical question. So I found it very interesting that you combine quantitative data, such as views or share, whatever, and qualitative data, because you said you're also using surveys, right? On a daily basis even. That's very interesting. And are you able also to show these results from the surveys in this Power BI dashboard? Because I wasn't aware that it's possible to show there also qualitative data in case you ask open questions, for example, right? And second question is, how do you derive recommendations for actions from this dashboard? Do you have also maybe a colleague who's responsible for that, or is it a team responsible for that? Thank you very much.
Yes. So the first one, the two dashboards, so the reputation dashboard and the other one for comms measurement, are not connected yet. And this is not Shahar's fault. It's a bit of a prioritization topic in our company, and we actually really like the reputation dashboard that Calibre offers, so we have not included that yet. But, for example, when we do our monthly and quarterly reviews in terms of what have we achieved against the backdrop of our strategic topics, we put those together. So we look at comms measurement first, output, outcome, and then we look at impact. So this is how it goes together. And me personally, I think you definitely need the combination of quantitative and qualitative feedback and data. For the second topic, yes, there are actually several people working on that. So within my team, Comm Strategy, I have 1-2 people that work on reputation measurement and drawing conclusions. It's interesting to see in our team, because we combine brand and comm strategy. So we come with the data, but we are also the users of this data to then derive actions for the brand. But we are in the lucky position as well that we have data analysts in our comms department. That's obviously not a luxury for everybody, depending on the size of your company. And we value that a lot, because they enable us, they push us a bit, they train us to get more comfortable with data on a daily level.
And again, to add on the Calibre survey side, so the qualitative parts, because it's a real-time dashboard, so the survey is primarily quantitative. When there's qualitative questions, we report in real time the answers through a word cloud, and then a more deep analysis of qual questions, open-ended questions, would come in a reporting, so more manual reporting quarterly or monthly or annually.
And there's a very interesting feature. You can do something that I would call like a flash survey. So if you really have a very important topic that you want to sound with stakeholders, there's a bit room besides like the standard set to include some extra questions and see how does that resonate. It's interesting, because there's a lot of flexibility in the tool.
It's amazing. I think we have time for one more question, at least, depending on how quick it is, maybe even for 2.
Okay, I don't know how quick it will be, but I'll try. Thank you very much for your talk, and I'm curious to learn more about the topic of data culture that you mentioned, because as communicators, as a profession, we're not usually in love with data by default. We like storytelling, we like creativity, so I'm curious to see what you did to build this data culture, to really integrate all the data and platforms into what your team does in their daily work and activities and processes.
Yeah, I think it's a careful balance, because you need to show that data will actually add value for the topic of storytelling. In our professions, I think it's good if you also rely on intuition and your experience, but then you need to add data as like an additional piece to make it powerful. And very concretely speaking, we have like a weekly longer data review in the circle I mentioned, the news conference. We do a monthly review of the aggregated data, let's say status quo. We have quarterly meetings, we have reportings, but I think it's very important to actually get into a discussion about data, because you can create a lot of lengthy PowerPoints with data that, yeah, you flip through and it's so good that we have them. But then it's about making it actionable, talking about it and saying, okay, now that we look at it, what are the 3 points we will derive from it, and turn around or adjust our communication because we saw it in the data. But I'm not going to give you a lot of hope that that's a quick fix. It's really a longer journey, and we're still on that journey. So it's, yeah, but it's worth it.
Super interesting. Shahar, any further addition? to the data culture?
I think that on the data culture, it's what we always see our clients struggling with, and we try to be kind of the ambassador of embedding data culture, but we do find that data culture is not just having the tools, it's having the processes, like what Rabea just mentioned. So what we often just advocate setting up processes, setting up roles for people responsible for it, and then setting up tools. And the three together, people responsible, right processes, and the tools, over time build the data culture. And there's also a lot of internal promotion. You need to talk about it, you need to showcase the benefits of it and the ROI, and that gradually works over time.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Shahar. Thanks so much, Rabea. This is your applause.